Hello everyone, welcome back to Third Sense. I'm Clem Harold. Today we're going to be talking about 5 of the biggest lies perpetrated by the abortion industry. Lie number 5, abortion is a necessary evil. This is the line of thinking that you'll often hear, where people will say, you know what, abortion's not good, it's not desirable, but it has to be legal to help people out in certain situations. It's the kind of thinking championed by Bill Clinton during his 1992 presidential campaign, where he said, you know what, abortion should be safe, it should be legal, and it should be rare. Clearly, however, his approach doesn't seem to have worked very well. You know, we're about 49 years away from the Supreme Court's 1973 Roe versus Wade decision, and over 60 million preborn lives have been lost since that catastrophic ruling. And it seems to me that when we talk about abortion being a necessary evil, we're falling into the same kind of mindset which perpetuated systems like slavery and systems like segregation. You know, the defenders of these systems said that maybe they weren't perfect, maybe they weren't desirable, but we had to keep them because if we removed them, then we would risk damaging the fabric of society. You know, the defenders of slavery said, if you get rid of this institution, then the South will be plunged into an economic disaster. But the reality is, America, 21st century America, is the richest nation in history. And so for us to say that we need abortion in order for our citizens to get ahead, or we need abortion because there are no other solutions, is a lie. Plain and simple. And you see this when you look at the facts. The 2,700 crisis pregnancy care centers across the country. For example, Texas's $100 million Alternatives to Abortion program. We have the resources, we have the means to ensure that abortion is no longer a necessary evil. In fact, it's never been a necessary evil. And I think here of a great line from Mother Teresa, who said, you know what, abortion shouldn't just be illegal, it should be unthinkable. And in any self-respecting, modern 21st century society, that should be our approach. Line number 4, the preborn baby is not a person. You know, the Hebrew Bible is really clear about the value and the dignity of every human being. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I consecrated you, God says to the prophet Jeremiah. This idea that every human being is created in God's image and likeness. It's a radical, unprecedented idea in the history of human thought. And yet it's an idea which in every age comes under attack, as we see in our own age. In every age, there's these efforts to undermine the dignity of various members of our human family. Whether it's the elderly, whether it's the poor, whether it's the handicapped or the unwanted, or indeed the preborn, as we see in our present day. And I think you see the hypocrisy, you see the double standard of the pro-abortionist approach. When you look at the example of, for instance, a celebrity woman conceiving a child and deciding that she wants to take that child to term. You know, because that child is wanted, that child in utero becomes the center of attention, the center of her universe, and very clearly to everyone involved, that baby is a baby worthy of celebration, of society's support and care. And yet you could have the exact same scenario where instead, this time, the baby is an unwanted child. It's an unwanted pregnancy. And in this instance, we're told, you know what? It's not a baby at all. It's simply a pregnancy. It's an unwanted pregnancy. It's even a tumor which has to be discarded clinically and quietly without moral qualms. And notice that the only difference between the two scenarios is that in the one instance, the baby is wanted, and in another instance, that child is not wanted. In the one instance, we say this baby deserves our love and protection. And in the next, we say that in the second trimester, we'd be perfectly content with a surgeon taking their forceps and tearing that child, tearing him or her apart, limb from limb, and crushing their fragile little skull. This, my friends, is a dangerous, dangerous lie. If you study history, you realize that any society which starts to predicate the value of the weak on the wants and desires of the strong is a society destined to continue to oppose the weak and continue on this evil path. And it's something which we ought to reject, and we ought to call the lie for what it is. Lie number 3, men shouldn't have an opinion. Now, to be clear, I do get the force of this lie. And I think there's actually a certain truth that it's getting at, which is that the reality is that it is selfish men, the selfish men who dominate our present society, who have been at the root cause of many of our societal problems. They've been actually at the root cause of the abortion industry. Why is that? It's because it's selfish men who stand to gain a huge amount from legalized abortion. What does abortion do for selfish men? It allows them to have relationships without commitment and sex without consequences. And so predictably, it's an all-male court that gives us Roe versus Wade. And it's primarily men through the White House, through the media, Hollywood, through the porn industry, who perpetuate this kind of society which relies on abortion and is happy for it to persist. The reality, however, is that in response to the weak men who dominate our society, we need a generation of strong men who are willing to step forward and stand up for their wives, their girlfriends, their partners, and their children, and say, you know what, enough is enough. We actually embrace responsibility. We embrace our calling to be protectors, to self-sacrifice, to give of ourselves, and to forego our own desires for the good of the other, for the good of my beloved, for the good of society. And so this lie which says that men can't be involved, men should keep to themselves, men can't have an opinion because they don't have a uterus, it is exactly that. It's a lie which relies on and perpetuates this system of weak men who don't get involved and allow this evil to endure. Lie number 2, women need abortion. At the core of this lie is a fear of womanhood. You know, the political commentator Andrew Klavan, he makes this point. He says that in almost every major dystopian novel, the destruction of womanhood is one of the central themes. And it really seems to me that when you look at the societal elites who sort of dominate our present society, many of them do have this inbuilt fear of what it means to be a woman. They see a woman's capacity to conceive and bear a child as being her great disadvantage, as the source of social inequality. And so while sure, on occasion, pregnancy is something to be celebrated, much more commonly it's seen as a menace, as an inconvenience. And young women are taught from a very young age that the very thing which makes them them is the thing most likely to hold them back in life. Against this line of thinking, the pro-life movement says, no, we can do so much better than that. That any society which says that women need to be able to discard their children in order to get ahead is a society which has failed its women and betrayed its children. And the truth is that the pro-life movement is a movement made up primarily by, of, and for women. And these are the very women who reject this lie of the abortion movement and say, you know what? Women do not need abortion. We would be much better without this. Lie number 1, God is not in control. Now, I know when it comes to the abortion debate, we're supposed to keep God out of the picture and we're not supposed to think of him. But the reality is that 87% of Americans believe in God. And when you look at other social changes in this country's history, whether it's the abolition of slavery, the ending of segregation, the champions of those changes were always believers in the Christian God, who champion those things precisely because of their belief in a loving God who cares for us. A God who knows our needs before we do, and who's always there to give us the strength we need to do the right thing. And so yes, we might have dark and difficult moments. Yes, we might have crises in our lives, but the reality is we have a loving Father who cares for us and is there to help us along the way. And so with that in mind, I want to quote from one well-known Christian author, Dr. Martin Luther King. And he had this to say. He said, "Evil may so shape events that Caesar will occupy a palace and Christ a cross. But that same Christ will rise up and split history into AD and BC, so that even the life of Caesar must be dated by his name. Yes, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." I hope and pray that justice is coming for America, that in the spirit of Martin Luther King, this country will come to the recognition that for the sake of its women, for the sake of its children, for the sake of its men as well, every human being deserves the full protection of the law. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Clem Harold with Third Sense. And remember, life is short, so be a saint.